Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode here of the Amazic podcast. And I'm Twain Taylor, editor at Amazic. And I want to encourage you to head over to Amazic to check out more podcasts like this that we do on an almost weekly basis. And we also cover a lot of events from the industry. We have a lot of articles. We have even job listings there. So definitely go and check out Amazic. That is amazic.com. I have with me today someone who's been here a couple of times already, and we share half a name. Uh, I'm Twain Taylor, and I have with me Taylor Dolezal, and he's no stranger to many of you if you've been to some of the KubeCons or if you've been around the CNCF open source projects. You've probably seen or heard of him. He's very active in the communities and he is the head of ecosystem at the CNCF, which is the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, which is the body that oversees Kubernetes and just the whole ecosystem of open source projects around it. So it's great to be having him with us. It comes with a lot of perspective and really looking forward to hearing from him today. So Taylor, thanks for joining us. It's great to have you on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to dive into some of these topics today. Happy to see all of you, even though I can't see you. I know you're out there. Great to dive in. Can't wait.
Yeah, yeah. And you've been here on the show already two times, so you're no stranger here. The first time you spoke about just the role of CNCF in this space and how the CNCF kind of enables collaboration on so many fronts and what your role is as part of that. And it kind of gave us a bit of a behind the scenes peek of what really happens, behind all of these huge open source projects that so many people and companies are behind. And the second time you came on, you really got us excited about open source, even as we're talking about just the financial, crisis that was kind of, in the news at that time. And just kind of got us excited about how, there's so much opportunity with open source, despite what else may be happening around. So, those are some really great conversations that, really stay in my mind, really some amazing things that you had shared. And today as well, I'm really excited about our topic because, it's something else, taking off from what we spoke. We're going to be talking about something timely as well this time. And we're going to be talking about just artificial intelligence and machine learning, which has been in the news pretty much since the whole of this year, with the launch of ChatGPT recently. There's just so much talk about it. And a lot of people actually look at it as hype, maybe. And some people obviously look at it as, the future and it's here. It's not just, or some people think it's the present. But really just wanted to get your thoughts on all of this and really, someone who's really out there on the front lines, what do you see, what you think of it? That's what we really want to bring out in this show. So really
Yeah,
excited to hear from you on that. So yeah, any opening comments at all to get kind of set the stage for this conversation?
yeah, I think that when it comes to artificial intelligence, generative AI, ML, there's a whole bunch of different terms and terminologies and productization, research. There's a whole bunch of different topics that people can cover going into this. So if we don't hit your topic today, don't fret. Doesn't mean that we're not thinking about it. And I definitely want to have conversations with more and more people as time goes on. I'm sure Twain does too, as you're as you're working on things within the AI space. I think some of the most interesting things, just as a general comment before we dive in, is it's been interesting hearing some of the concerns. You know, AI can unlock a lot of things for a lot of people. A lot of the focus is on productivity improvements, kind of even rethinking ways that you deal with search engines or querying knowledge or getting insights about certain things. I think that's where a lot of the benefits are going to come from these kinds of technologies and integrations. So you don't have time to watch that 50-minute video. Maybe you can have something look through that and pull out some of the executive summary or some of the bullet points of, as far as things to go look up afterwards. Maybe even having it annotate show notes and things like that to help you be better and to learn more and more quickly, more cohesively. I think that's where a lot of the success stories come on that front. As far as things that are still difficult, I think it's figuring out the right way to solve these things, right? AI isn't best for everything the same way as Kubernetes shouldn't be like, that's the only solution, right? It's thinking about the intention behind what you're doing on that front is really a powerful thing to think about. While it's really exciting, it is in a little bit of a hype cycle right now. It makes sense to pair that along with the facts and the really awesome things that people are doing within the community, especially the end users from the CNCF community, like Adobe with their Firefly product. We've seen them launch generative images that you can create on that front, and they're hyper realistic. Those are the Adobe team is running a stack on Kubernetes for that. So we're seeing cloud native power a lot of these AI workflows, workloads, and I'm excited to see what comes of that. It's paired with that. I think there is AI safety, being aware of the ways that you can manipulate AI or use output of that to do not so great things. It's really important for people to be aware of the ways in which things can be used and ways which things can be misused. Right? You have the intention of using a hammer to drive a nail into the wall, not hit yourself on the thumb. So helpful to kind of understand the scope of everything within this space. But yeah, I'm excited to dive in. Let's talk about some AI stuff.
All right. Yeah, that's a great overview. So how did this first come on your radar? Can you take us back a bit and tell us about, what first made you what got your attention when it comes to AI and ML?
So I've been very loosely keeping up to date with things within machine learning and artificial intelligence space. As time has gone on, we've seen things like image recognition. I've done a couple toy projects at home or on the weekend where I've used some of that to classify images and just kind of better understand the technology. TensorFlow, PyTorch, all of those things. And it's fascinated me, but it's always felt a little bit out of reach, right? It's felt a lot more scientific or things I've wanted to take a look at, but just haven't had time to, unfortunately. Just life's what happens when you make plans kind of thing. So I've had a lot of respect for the people that have continued that forward. So we've seen a few cases of machine learning and AI folks getting involved within the cloud native ecosystem too. Projects like Kubeflow and kind of more helping on the model training and like the learning kind of facets as far as this goes. We've seen less in what folks are calling inference, which is basically calling a large language model or working with AI ML to derive an outcome out of that. That's your generated image from AI, that's looking something up or querying something from a knowledge base or a large language model that you have. So that's been really interesting. I think it's the productization, things like ChatGPT, Bard, Gemini, all these other things that are starting to come up now that are really driving interest towards things because it's no longer conceptual or this abstract thing. It's tactile, it's tangible, it's something that you can actually go and explore today, which is really useful. I remember about a year ago, I think it was November last year, where ChatGPT got launched and I heard about it and I was like, oh, AI to help out chatbots? That doesn't really okay, maybe I'm all for a better chatbot, but really, I didn't really understand it from a personal sense back then until I went to go explore it. And I was like, wow, this is really powerful. This is really helpful and started using it immediately. I don't think it's rare that there's a day I don't use it. So really like the accessibility of tools like this and exploring new ways in which people can use it as well. I think that as time goes on, again, I'm really curious to see how these things correlate to other products or ways in which people can envision using this too. I think there is that. The folks I've talked with, there's a little bit of a consensus of folks that have always wanted AI to be something that is a person replacement, like go do this thing, go set up these appointments for me, read through my calendar, make me a sandwich, do all these things. But that's not what AI is best at. Right now, AI is really good at doing those small, very focused tasks very well. And so it's really just a paper cut eliminator, right? If there's something you want to summarize, you need help creating an outline for a project plan or something else, or just getting started with maybe a blog post that you're going to write, it can help out with that. But it's not a replacement, it's a tool, I think, is the thing that's a typical conversation I have with people. That's usually what was kind of sparking some worry and other things. And I do think it's important to be concerned about any technology, right? And making sure that it's used responsibly and that we defend appropriately against bad actors and things of that nature. But using it just as little tiny tools in your toolbox to make your life that much better is a great place to start on that front.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people use it, like you say, on a daily basis just to get started with something. And it's really good for all kinds of different tasks that are simple, and probably you need basic input, it really helps. But I was wondering, when you talk about cloud native, and obviously there's different use cases, but what do you think are the use cases most closely related to where can AI and ML really help when it comes to cloud native or DevOps? Considering there's technology, and there's different there's data, there's code, there's metrics, there's so many things that these applications in the space work with. So considering that, where do you think AI and ML really helps in this space?
So that's something that we're trying to grok and work through right now, is kind of like, where does this fit in? And what we've been able to outline right now and better understand is that it's really 3 different tiers of focus. It's the actual hardware. You need to interact with the GPUs or graphical processing units, and making sense of how you use them, which then pairs with the infrastructure. So between those 2 things, each of those is a separate layer, but we need to think about each of those and how they work, right? You're interacting with the GPU, you need to have instruction sets, you need to have APIs, you need to have some kind of integration with them, because you then put them into your infrastructure. And that's where at the CNCF, where we're very focused on, many of these companies are using Kubernetes to either train or power the APIs that are running these large language models. So that's another layer that we need to think about. Then the final layer at the top is the applications themselves. Those are the patterns, again, the APIs, the specs, the standards, and thinking through how we connect that. So it's this interlinked connection of these 3 layers of things, from hardware to infrastructure to software. But figuring out the horizontal space of that too is really helpful. What projects are in each of those specific layers that might be of interest to people? What foundations are available so that you can get more information or understand where these things are housed or governed, because that really, how something is form dictates function. And so understanding the governance and all those things within the projects is very important. It's not something just be like, oh yeah, and to hand wave away. It's worth taking a deeper look into, and really introspecting what's going on there. And those I think are the biggest things right now. Again, we're really focused on the infrastructure piece of this puzzle right now. There were a lot of conversations at KubeCon, Cloud Native Con in Chicago in November about how do we start thinking about including GPUs into the stack, and then Kubernetes as far as how we schedule and orchestrate things on that front too. There were many good talks by Tim Hawkin, who works at Google, and he's incredibly instrumental as far as beginning and making sure that we continue to have that discussion as far as how do we put all these pieces together. So yeah, right now the short answer to your question is really focused on infrastructure stuff right now, but very much thinking about the hardware and software implications of what that drives.
Well, really interesting, because I was thinking mostly about just I think, as you said, the software layer and how AI and ML helps there. But I think you really rightly, mentioned the hardware and the infrastructure layers, which really drive the software layer. Could you tell us a bit more about the kind of challenges in the hardware and the infrastructure layers, and tell us about what are those challenges and how what are some of the ways that people are trying to solve them? Just give us a little more on that if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, one of the challenges is that so we have effectively really commoditized the way that we work with CPUs, central processing units, and memory, RAM, things of that nature, hard drives, space. All of those things make a lot of sense to how we work with workloads right now when it comes to infrastructure and software and hardware. That's mostly a solved problem. You could argue that GPUs are a solved problem as well, but it really takes on a different shape of work when you pull those into the mix. GPUs are really good at doing a lot of little tasks very quickly. Batch workloads, you're doing a whole bunch of things and you want to crunch a bunch of numbers at the same time. You're running summations on a whole bunch of mathematical calculations. GPUs have been pulled in a lot recently to different kinds of workloads like blockchain, crypto, encryption. There are many different use cases for GPUs because they don't process things one at a time. Even multitasking. Some CPUs can have multiple cores, and you can run multiple things at a time, but not at the level that GPUs can. They're fundamentally different. They have a different construction. So trying to rethink, we have this brand new Lego block or puzzle piece that we can add into our infrastructure, our software, and as a piece of hardware. And so it's really just, oh my gosh, we have a brand new tool. How do we start thinking about this in scaling these workloads? And so that's definitely one component that is of a major piece of discussion. Within the Kubernetes project, you can put GPUs on a machine, you can link them to your cluster, you have the ability to schedule those things. But when it comes to driving efficiency out of that and making sure that you can fully leverage the power of your GPU, that's still an ongoing problem, right? Where you can use them, it works, but how do we improve this? How do we make it better? And then that's what Tim Hawkin was talking a lot about, was how do we start thinking about inference as the new kind of web app? That's what Kubernetes was built for, was web apps and these other kinds of services and application stacks. But inference is very different. We can still diagram it out. It's still microservices. There's things that we can connect together. You could even have a monolith. But thinking about how we leverage GPUs in that capacity, I think, is the biggest point of discussion right now, is reaching what's called inference, which is utilizing LLMs and AI and ML as a regular part of application development.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And are there particular open source projects that are dedicated to these things that you'd like to maybe call out? I think you mentioned one of them, this LLM startup. Is that a project itself, the LLM Startup Act?
Yeah, I'm actually happy to jump into that. So on stage, Priyanka Sharma, our executive director or GM here at the CNCF, gave a demo, and she wanted to showcase what it was like to get working with large language models. And we used a couple. She had used a couple projects within the ecosystem. One was Docker. You basically need a way to run containers. Kind, which is Kubernetes in Docker. And then kubectl, which is just the way that you interact with Kubernetes as a command line interface. So I didn't get I didn't do the correct sacrifice to the demo gods today, so I won't run this for you. But more than happy to provide you a video of Priyanka running this in production. It is live on GitHub. It's public, so you can pull it down. You could test it out on your own. This uses something called Ollama, and so we have images that are run and generated on here too. You can check out the GitHub actions and see how those Docker containers are built. Again, I love open source because you can go and introspect all these things. You can raise up an issue, et cetera, et cetera. And so what Priyanka did here was basically ran a web application that used Ollama, which is an LLM registry. She pulled down an LLM, which was called Mistral, and then that was ready to go. She had another application that was written using LangChain. So that's not a CNCF project yet, but is a great way to interact with large language models, work with those APIs, and set up an application. I believe it's in, what is that? The bot py. So yeah, here's the code. Again, I won't read it to you, but you can check it out in your own time. This basically opened up a chat box that Priyanka used to ask the Mistral large language model, what is the CNCF? What does it do? And it was able to provide a response. And then this demo application has some nice KubeCon, Cloud Native Con, North America imagery behind it and some other things too. But yeah, you can definitely check this out. What's worth noting is that we also had a, where is it? There was a Neo4j database that was part of this demo as well. And so what that ended up doing is it's called a, what is it? It's called RAG. The definition of the acronym is escaping me right now. But basically, the stack that you use to spin up these large language model applications is a little bit different. You can kind of think of an LLM as a service and a database that you run, and a model that you can constantly keep updated. And then you typically want to have a vector database that runs side by side with this, because you don't want to have to query the LLM every single time that you're making a request, right? If people keep asking, what's the recipe for chocolate chip cookies as an example, you wouldn't have to, it's very process intensive to continue running that over and over and over again. Using something like a vector database, you can actually store the output of that and then just use that almost as a cache to return those examples. And so Priyanka's demo allows you the option to do that, which is really helpful. And then Kind is a really just kind of a test harness that the Kubernetes project uses to quickly spin up a Kubernetes cluster, run it in Docker, and you're off to the races. You're ready to get going on that front. What was it? I had one more thing on that front too, but it's escaping me, but I'm sure it'll come back to me on that front. But oh, that's what it was. Ollama is nice because it allows you to download many different types of large language models, ones that are open, Apache licensed, others might be a little bit more restrictively licensed, and then figure out what you want to use on that front. So that's quite helpful. But Ollama runs things off of your CPU, though you can enable a GPU kind of integration. So right now on my MacBooks and macOS equipment, my stack runs a little bit slower, but it's still pretty fast. I have some of the newer ARM chips personally, so this runs decently fast, but if you really wanted to leverage the full power of a GPU, you could pull in some NVIDIA gear and some other stuff that's a little bit more supportive of the AI workflows and workloads on that front, and get a lot better performance on that front too. But yeah, check it out. LLM Starter Pack, check it out. Uses all openly licensed software and things like that are compliant with a lot of the stuff within the CNCF and our policies and procedures. I'm excited to see more projects join the CNCF as time goes on within the AI space. I believe there was like a Kubernetes GPT project that had applied a couple months ago, but didn't make the cut just yet. They kind of got to come back in a couple months once the community's been bolstered a little bit, and then they're going to reapply on that front. So yeah, very excited to see all the things that come out of all of these efforts. It's a wild world. It's vast, and it's exciting to see what everybody's working on.
Yeah, thanks for showing us that. It's really cool and definitely something to go and check out after watching this. I want to ask about, even in the other projects, the sandbox and the incubating projects, have you seen any efforts at all to kind of include AI and ML, to help them, do something more or better in any way? Anything on that front that you've noticed in the community?
Yeah, right now there's a specific working group that's coming up. I think it's based between, again, you have to fact check me on this one. I think it's between the TAG runtime and app delivery groups. TAG stands for Technical Advisory Group. Those folks are underneath our TOC, or Technical Oversight Committee. That's the technical arm of the CNCF. That's our group of community members that decide the technical direction of the foundation, approving projects, archiving them, working with those communities. The tags themselves are where a lot of that technical stuff happens, discussions, specs, talking through adoption and kind of how to drive everything on that front. And then working groups can sit under one or many different tags. And there's a lot of folks that want to talk through AI, ML, and those other generative AI topics. And so that's getting booted up and spun up now as we are closing out the year. I think that came up a little bit earlier, but that's the best place that if folks want to, even if you just want to listen in, you don't have to be a CNCF member to join. It's fully open source. You can just kind of come in, lurk, listen, understand terminology, take notes, and just kind of gain value on that front. If you want to come and have discussions as well, you're more than welcome. Help add to the agenda, etc. That's the best thing about open source is that openness and ability to interact with people in a vendor neutral space. Really, it's outside of a little bit outside of the hype zone. Hype is almost inescapable, much like gravity, but it offers a little bit more intellectually honest place to have those discussions.
And do these discussions happen on Slack or elsewhere?
They'll happen on calls, typically a Zoom call, and then those meetings will happen at their specific cadences. I'm happy to share out links, or please feel free to at me if you're looking for guidance on where to go to attend those meetings. But all of our open source communities will have public calendars that they'll share, and then they'll share their cadence of meetings, meeting notes, and then previous meetings are most typically uploaded to YouTube on that front. Some governance bodies will have private discussions and things like that from time to time, but it's not often. It's not the common case. And usually those discussions are more just about operability, process, just your very fun ways on project management, which are which the community won't benefit from in most cases. But all public discussions and things like that are open to all within the community. And are typically published to YouTube after the fact so that you can go catch up and see what discussions have been had.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I want to ask about, even as, there's a general talk about just, the ethics behind it and even the people issues. You mentioned safety as well at the start. Anything on those lines that you noticed of, as people look to integrate AI and ML into their workflow, into their applications? What are some of the things that you've noticed, or some of the scenarios that you've seen, some of the key points of learning that you had over the past few months? Any insights at all that you can share on that front in terms of ethics and just the safety of using AI and ML?
Yeah, there is a lot to unpack here, and I don't have all the hours in the day. Unfortunately, you only gave me one, so I can I can only get into so many. Some of the more interesting ones. One of the earlier examples of this was, I think, Samsung was using ChatGPT to enhance some of their code, and unfortunately, that ended up getting leaked because OpenAI had this. I can't remember if it was a data leak or the ability to share out that chat. Basically, that got leaked to the world, unfortunately, and set a painful, for Samsung, example of what are the best ways to interact with large language models, and how do we spin them up? Does it make sense to have them completely public? The answer is no, not for everybody. There's some things that do make sense to supply your LLMs and to work with these models, but there are cases where you don't want to provide it with personally identifiable information, sensitive data, trade secrets. The advice that I have for most people considering starting out their journey or are well on their way is start thinking about your data classification first. That's the best way. And I know that's not the fun AI news that you want to hear, but that's how you're going to best set yourself up for a successful future, is by making sure that you understand the data that you're working with in the first place, and then rating it as far as like, no, it's, if this got leaked, would it be a problem? If the answer is yes, rethink about your policies and how you're providing that to your LLM. Many LLMs have new attack vectors as well. So you can kind of poison your LLMs if you're hosting one internally, and providing it a whole bunch of data. And then if you're using that to then further enrich the model, other people can access it within your company. There was a report that just came out, I think it was this week, saying that the Bard or DeepMind team at Google had ended up cracking something within OpenAI's ChatGPT by asking it to say poem in perpetuity forever. And then they were able to get access by doing that. That unlocked their ability to take a look at previous training data and some other things within the model. Not access to their infrastructure, but just more information about how they train and they work with OpenAI's ChatGPT and that language model. So there's new kinds of attacks that make sense to think about and to prepare for. Some organizations have outright said, we're not going to use LLMs at all. No, and that's not our advice from the Linux Foundation side. We do have guidance out, very general guidance, but guidance on how people can go about using these tools that the Linux Foundation published. If folks are looking for more specific recommendations on things, our legal team is standing by and ready to help deal with that backlog of things that are coming in. We want questions to be asked so that we can give specific guidance for specific contexts, but we do have a very general guidance right now, and it's, this is absolutely worth exploring. It really mirrors the early open source adoption too. In those days, people were like, no, don't use open source, it's not secure. Surprise, it actually is. It really works well when you're able to talk with the community and kind of enumerate all of these kinds of outcomes or problem spaces that you're working within. The power of the group is always going to be better than the power of just a few in many, many, many cases. Not always, but in many cases. And I feel like that's the same kind of thing that we're going to see within LLMs, Gen AI, and everything else too, is having these discussions in the open. Some interesting use cases where people have started to think through these more complex kinds of interactions with their LLMs that they're self-hosting or sending out to vendors is checking to see what that payload looks like. So they'll have an intermediary step where they'll send out, it'll go to query the LLM, and then it will go through a policy engine and actually check and make sure that that looks like a social security number. No, we don't want to send that over. Or, looks like you're sending some internal code that's very top secret. Let's stop that. So you have this intermediary that's actually handling those requests that are outgoing or even are internal, but before it hits the LLM, it'll stop it in its tracks. So there's some really interesting new things to take into account as you're going and adopting these tools and thinking through a lot of these workflows. I'm trying to think if there's anything else on that front, but I think those are the most interesting kinds of ethics and other cases that you want to think through. Always be thinking about what you put in your text box is my very general information.
Those are really helpful. Thanks for sharing all of those examples. And it's amazing that, even the biggest companies like Samsung could, have loopholes and kind of get compromised with just, with small oversights when it comes to AI and ML. So definitely something to be mindful of as we use these new technologies. And I wanted to ask about just the influence of what do you see when you go to the events, KubeCons and the other events? What do you see on stage? What do you see in the presenters, and how the products that they present and their take on AI and ML? What are some of the new things that you notice and learn as you attend and watch the presentations? What happens on stage and then even the booths? How do you see AI and ML, the conversations there?
The conversations around AI and ML are very interesting at different events, at our own and others that I've been to as well. From KubeCon, Cloud Native Con to others within the world. And I'm becoming better at hearing where some of the hype is and knowing kind of where to push in and ask some questions as far as better understanding the stack or the adoption story. So since I work at the CNCF, we're vendor neutral. So I love having conversations that I like having those intellectually honest conversations where we try to understand the stack. I always try to dive into the intent and understand what somebody's trying to work towards. So that's what's most fun for me working within the space and getting to hear all about these at these different conferences. I think because of my sphere of people, it's mostly been things that have been focused within the infrastructure and app development space, a little bit less on hardware. but there is this observation where there's a lot of productization of LLMs, AI, ML, etc., going on right now. And there's some folks want to see a little bit more of a return to the research phase and kind of publicize some of those things. One of the biggest things that I've seen more LLMs start to do is citations and show where it actually pulled or got this information, which is a lot more useful than, if I asked you to write me up a report or something like that. It's you might cite some works and things like that if you're being a little bit more formal, but in most cases, we don't typically get that citation. We almost never get that when it comes to code, right? We have libraries, packages, and these other things that help cite things a little bit, but when it comes to, oh, here's the bubble sort algorithm I learned back in college and this year, we don't do that, but we're starting to see LLMs start to do those things too. So that's, I think, really useful. That's what's really helpful to people that are maintaining and contributing to projects, as well as seeing that, okay, this is a pull request that we're going to take a look at. It was influenced a little bit with some large language models. Okay, let's take a look. Different patterns, you might see different patterns come across versus individual people. That's the only thing we've been used to taking a look at so far. Now, as we start to factor in output from LLMs and other things, me personally, I wouldn't say it's worth being concerned about, but you should always be introspecting your code, right? That's why it's called pull request and you review it. It's this chance to take a look at whether it's a human or not. It's worth taking a deeper look into. So I think that's the same kind of energy I encourage and want other people to bring into the ecosystem as you go to events and things like that. Ask the hard questions, really try to dig into what the core focus is, what's the problem that's actually being solved, what's the intent of the people trying to drive at these things. Are these people falling in love with the problem or just creating solutions for things? I think that'll help you navigate a little bit of the hype. And provide a lot better feedback to these people that are working with these products too. I think that's the more useful feedback is helping to shape that thing to an actual outcome that you need help with, rather than, okay, there's like 80 of these things that none of them do that really well. Okay, this isn't something I need, versus something that's actually helping you crack or solve a problem.
All right. So, as we wind down, I want to ask about, for someone who's looking to get involved, and, there's so much happening, across the board, but you have some of the biggest tech companies in the world focused on this, AI and ML opportunity. And like you were mentioning, so many open source projects, operating at different layers of the stack. There's so much happening. And then there's, the whole thing of, do we solve these problems as a community open source model, or do we, build something proprietary? There's that tension, or that option rather. So someone looking at all of this, and looking at, like you were saying, trying to avoid the hype and get to something that's actually, going to have value and be a useful project or something useful to work on. How do they approach just, finding something that's going to be good for them? How do they look at this mix of, open source versus proprietary, and, joining a big company and working on a project there, or something small and niche? How would you guide someone just going through that journey?
So my high level advice on that front would be come and join the conversation. It's free. You're more than welcome, even if you're just listening and trying to tune in and make sense of all the acronyms and words and terminology. I'd say it's my favorite open source advice I've ever been given, and I love giving it to others, is step 1, show up, step 2, stick around. And I think that translates to a lot of different contexts, but it's very true when it comes to open source and getting involved. Some of the other footnotes that I have for that are have a general idea of what you want to get into. A lot of people, hear open source, they hear that it's good, they hear about the community. You've gotten the highlights in a very general sense of the community, though. That then inspires people to ask the question, great, open source, where do I get started? And that's like, cooking, where do I get started? You're like, oh my gosh, there's so many recipes to learn. Very much the same thing when it comes to open source, especially within our community. If you know a general sense for like cuisine or type of meal that you want to craft, you're going to be in a lot better space for being able to get the assistance from others and know where to go on that front. I think open source is a little bit too broad, unfortunately. I wish it were easier, but it's not. It's just a very vast space. Part of the good and the bad thing about it is there's so much going on all the time, and knowing which conversation to jump into can be difficult. I'm more than happy to help and sit and chat with you and listen to you on that front if you're having trouble kind of like, you're like, oh, I like security, but I also like identity management. I like a little bit of app delivery. I'm more than happy to talk with you through some of those things, as are many community members on that front. The best place to get started is probably have an idea loosely of what you want to do, just a little bit past open source in general. You know, is it app delivery? Is it security? Is it networking, storage, databases, LLMs? Kind of figuring out a flavor or topic that you want to get interested in that will simplify a lot of your search journey when it comes to open source. And then it starts to pair well with the technical oversight committee and our tags that we have. We've got many tags all focused on very specific things, you know, again, security, network, etc. And that's a great place to start joining those meetings, or specific CNCF projects. Say you work a lot with Kubernetes at work, or you're interested in getting involved with Kubernetes. These projects, as they grow and become bigger, have their own micro communities, you know, called SIGs, or special interest groups within the project themselves. So that's a good place. That's decent advice for how to navigate these things. We do have contribute.cncf.io that's worth checking out as well. That kind of gives you a little bit more information on being a contributor, if you're really up to it, maintainer of projects, and kind of what that looks like, what that description for that duty looks like, and then other assets within our community. There's many ways to get involved too. It doesn't have to just be code. You don't have to rewrite the orchestrator for Kubernetes. You can get involved with documentation process, helping drive things, clarifying GitHub issues. There are so many things to do, and we always need help within our community. So yeah, when in doubt, show up, stick around, and then the optional third is become a leader within the space.
Wow, very cool. Do you see AI and ML itself becoming a separate tag on its own, or do you see it, for a while continuing as, being a part of security and these other tags that are existing right now?
That's been a roiling discussion. It's been violently interesting, and because it's so overarching, we're seeing pockets of AI and ML in just about everything, and so I see it becoming more of a core component of many of these different tags. So I don't think it will become one on its own necessarily, but I do see it being nested all over the place. Again, hardware, infrastructure, app stack, it's really everywhere. That's one quote I've heard about AI and ML within the open source and other spaces are, the cat's not just out of the bag, it's running down the street, which very much feels to be the truth.
Wow. Last question for you, Taylor, is just as you look ahead the next year or so, what excites you, or what are you keeping your eye on the most? What would excite you the most to see happen? Anything on that? Any closing thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that what would really excite me over this next year is trying to seeing people align on what some of these stacks start to look like. I think that if we can start to get more cohesive blueprints for how these things work, if we can create something that's generic in terms of a framework that works 80% of the time, and then continue those efforts forward, I think that that's going to be really helpful. Honestly, just having more people align their actions with the talk that we're already doing within the community is also going to be huge, right? We can bike shed something, which is talk something, a euphemism used to talk about something in perpetuity, and they unfortunately never get to the work, which can happen quite a bit in open source, admittedly. But pairing that with reports and findings and efforts and connecting people together that are willing to do some of that work is that's my hope for this next year, is we can really start to concentrate some efforts and make more sense of the space as we keep getting deeper and deeper into it.
All right, awesome. We're almost at the end of our conversation, but before you go, I got a couple of questions to get to know you a little bit more. Um, I have a couple of questions, but I wanted to actually start with, I saw your dog behind you, so I wanted to start with just that. Tell us a bit about your dog. What's your dog's name, and maybe one thing about your dog that we don't know?
Yeah. So her name is Gracie. She is 14. She's a border collie. I've had her since she's been 6 months old, and she's turning 15 on December 25th. So yeah, she is very helpful with coding problems, and yeah, I bring up all of my open source strategy problems and code issues and stack traces, and she sits there, she listens, and then we figure out the problem together. So she's a great coding buddy.
That's awesome. Wow, 15 years. Yeah, I have a dog that's 11. I thought she's getting old, but yeah, 15, great age. All right.
I think the oldest border collie lived to be 28 years. So I'd say, yeah, so it might be another 13, who knows?
Neat. Um, yeah, next question. Well, uh, what's your what's your favorite moment from one of the recent KubeCons that you kind of remember vividly?
I think I'm always a fan of the keynotes and the hallway tracks as far as KubeCons go. I'm pulled into those contexts very frequently, and yeah, I love getting to see a KubeCon, Cloud Native Con get kicked off, and just all of the energy and excitement in people's faces. Sometimes the lack of coffee and a few others, but seeing the enthusiasm and that collectivism behind everybody within that same space. I think that's never lost on me. Just seeing that spark and that energy, and seeing that continue time after time again. I love that.
Those are really inspiring. And I mean, you get to probably spend time kind of preparing for those things behind the scenes before the event. So, just seeing all that come together must be really satisfying. It's very inspiring to watch.
That's a reward, is getting to see all of the community and then work on the puns for keynotes and getting all those polished. Not all of them have been field tested by that time, but those are always fun too.
Yeah. Well, this one, I don't know if you'd even want to say a single answer to it, but which is the open source project that you spend the most time on? I don't know if you want to say one that you spend most time on today or in the past, but yeah, which
My
one
my
is
my
most time?
my journey on that front is my quick abbreviated list is I went from .NET and stuff, which wasn't open source, over to PHP, Ruby, Go. That got me into Docker. That got me into Kubernetes, and then Ansible and some other things at the time. And then that's just continued me on to Rust and a couple other things. And while I have downtime, most of work and working with the community keeps me busy, but when I get hands-on keyboard time and get to work on demos, talks, and other things, I find that I'm still using a lot of stuff from Kubernetes and Docker. Go, Rust is the thing I'm trying to learn right now and get better at. But yeah, love those. And then shout outs to the GitHub command line interface. That's been a wonderful tool. And then Homebrew, which keeps my Mac OS updated constantly.
Wow, quite a few. Nice. What's your favorite method of learning?
I would say doing. It's I do love reading and kind of getting into some things. It depends on what the topic is, but it is a mix for me in terms of reading, watching a video, and then putting that together into a little project where I actually do the thing and reinforce that learning. I think people have found that when it comes to cognition, that's the thing, is by doing the thing is how you learn it best. And then understanding that when learning is difficult, that actually means that you're doing it right. If it's something that feels easy, the likelihood that you're going to remember it is far lower, is what they've found. So I've found that fascinating.
All right, all right. Yeah, I think especially with tech, that's really the best way to do it. Um, what's your favorite drink?
I'm going to pull it up on screen right now. So yeah, it was in the koozie, keeping it nice and chill. But I like coffee's not bad, but I like a drink called yerba mate, and that's basically a tea, and it has the same caffeine equivalence as coffee does. Has L-theanine in it, so you don't get the jitters by drinking too much of it either. So, but yeah, I'm a huge fan of some yerba mate with some honey, or this Goyaki brand when don't have time to brew it up myself.
So does it taste more like tea or coffee or?
Yeah, it's really good. It's a little bit earthy, not too much, just very light taste. And then this one is called Tropical Uprising. So there's a little bit of like other fruit juices and things like that in this one. But yeah, it usually takes the shape on of the honey or whatever sweetener you add to it. Otherwise, it's kind of a very light, earthy taste and very easy to drink. It's not something you're like, oh my gosh, that's terrible, kind of thing. Definitely a little bit more tea vibes for sure.
Mhm. All right, all right. Wondering if this will be part of the answer to the last question as well. Uh, one hack that helps you get stuff done.
So one thing I've picked up recently, I'm a very big fan of a tool called Obsidian, and that's a note-taking application. So I used to use Evernote. I use Obsidian now. That's one thing that really helps me get things done. But when I pair that with something called the PARA method, so PARA stands for Projects, Areas, Resources, Archive. And then there's kind of a hidden one there too. It's inbox. It's the unsorted stuff that you need to put into one of those 4 areas. And so projects should be time bound. Areas are things like health or wellness or cloud native computing. And then resources are things like PDFs, books, and other stuff that you might use to pair with the P or the A as part of that acronym. Archive is just you timestamp something and throw it in there, and it's okay because you can actually use search functions and capabilities across all of your tools, me with Obsidian and a couple others. But that framework is one hack that has wildly helped me over the past couple months. I used to struggle kind of all the context switching and everything on that front. So nice to have something where I can put a specific date on something. It's not learn Rust, it's make this toy CLI app and then give it a time frame that I'm actually going to finish it. So that's and then other community efforts too. It's helped me deliver a lot more this year. So I'm a big fan of that framework. And there's a book called The Para Method that talks a little bit more about that. You can check out.
Really interesting. Yeah, I've been hearing about Obsidian a lot myself. Yeah. Uh, does it come naturally to you to kind of note down things and put it in the inbox and stuff, or is this something you had to develop over time?
Definitely had to develop over time. It was actually last year about this time that I picked up Obsidian. I was like, okay, I keep hearing about this. I'm going to take time and actually learn this. I wanted to get better at my note taking in 2023, which happened. Not perfect by by any means, but started that journey within 2023, really December 2022, and continuing it forward this year, developing better frameworks, templates, etc. It's I've always operated, I'll take notes and things, but the problem with that is I would write the note and store it, but I wouldn't refer to it later or past, when I had needed it. So that was more the problem for me. Now I have living, breathing notes, and then I'll move it meaningfully to an archive state or go and reference something when I need it. Yeah, it's taken about a year to get into that practice meaningfully, but more than worth it. It's been a game changer for me.
Yeah, yeah. And as we wind down the year now as well, yeah, I think it's something I should check out for myself. And this time of the year, we all go to those productivity apps and, try to think about how we can do things better.
Noted. Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was great having you, Taylor, on the show. Thanks so much for joining us. I love how you make open source exciting and approachable, and you're just so welcoming and friendly. It's just wonderful having you with us. Thanks so much for all that you shared today. Yeah, yeah, thanks so much, and hope to have you again, maybe not in the near future, but hopefully at some point soon. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Twain. I really appreciate it.